Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Versi Adams. I'm an Exemplar Global Certified Auditor to AS9100 and ISO 9001 standards. What I'm going to do today is to help you understand and comply with Clause 7.5 of the standard, which deals specifically with documented information. Okay, everybody, let's start with 7.51, the general section of the standard that deals with documented information. So the organization's quality management system shall include A, documented information required by this international standard, and B, documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the quality management system. And note, the extent of documented information for a quality management system can differ from one organization to another due to the size of the organization and its type of activities, processes, products, and services, the complexity of processes and their interactions, and the competence of persons. Okay, so 7.51 general, what I just read to you, what does that mean to you and your organization and the rest of the manufacturing world? Okay, so the organization's quality management system shall include documented information required by this international standard. So throughout the standard, you're going to see the word documented information, actually the term documented information stated throughout the standard 79 times in a combination of ways. It's going to be stated as documented information shall be retained, shall be available, or shall be maintained. Those are key words to pay attention to when you see those words referenced throughout the standard. So in other words, again, that documented information, whether it's a record, whether it's a form, whether it is a procedure, it needs to be maintained as documented information and be available to me or to any other auditor that's going to come into your facility and audit you for compliance to 7.5 documented information. Okay, now going on further, B says documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the quality management system. So this goes beyond the standard requirement for documented information. This talks about your own requirements for documented information, whatever you determine as necessary documentation that you need to retain as evidence of compliance to the quality management system. You need to maintain that document, whether it's a record, a calibration certificate, the results of an inspection that has occurred, the results of a contract review, an order review, the responses to a corrective action request, both internal or external. That's all documented information that you need to maintain. Okay? Now the note here says the extent of documented information for a quality management system can differ from one organization to another due to the size of the organization and its type of activities, processes, products, and services, the complexity of processes and their interactions, and then the competence of persons. So what that's really saying is that, there are large companies and there are small companies. And there are some companies that have some very complex processes and assemblies and manufacturing steps that occur throughout the quality management system. So that goes to say that the amount of documentation is going to be greater for some of those companies that are larger and have a lot of complex activities that take place within their quality management system. Now those companies that are smaller and have some relatively simple processes are not going to have a lot of documentation requirements because of their processes, right? And the last item there says the competence of persons. So again, with some of these high-level processes and very complex processes within some of these larger companies that have those types of processes, you're going to have more training needs and more detailed training needs. So the competence of persons, the training of people within the organizations going to be a little greater than those, again, those smaller companies with a lot of less complex processes to carry out. So that's what that really means to you and I and the rest of the manufacturing world, okay? Okay, so let's go on further now, and let's talk about 7.52, creating and updating. So when creating and updating documented information, the organization shall ensure appropriate A, identification and description, example, title, date, author, or reference number. B, the format, example, language, software version, graphics, and media, and also whether it's going to be paper or electronic format. And then C, the review and approval for suitability and adequacy. Okay, so the documents within your QMS system need to be under document control, as stated in 7.5 of the standard. Right here I have a couple of examples of documents that are under document control. The one to the far left is a receiving inspection procedure revision A. Document number is QMSP 1007, and the revision and approval status is indicated by the revision table in section 2. States the revision, the date, the nature of the changes, and who approved the document, which is blacked out for obvious reasons. Now to the far right we have another document which is FOR-001. It's an order review checklist. So this order review checklist is used by the order review team to determine if the company can meet the customer's requirements stated on the PO. Down to the very bottom there we have the document number again, and the document name, and then the revision is revision 1. And what this company has done is they've gone a little bit further and they've added a footer here that states this document is uncontrolled if printed. So that's a good thing to have, so that if there are documents sitting on someone's desk or out in production at a workstation, it's clear that that document may not be the latest revision, so it's up to the user of that document to go inside of your document control system and verify they have the most current revision. Okay, so the next requirement of the standard 7.5 in terms of documenting information is to maintain the format of the documents that are released into your QMS system. So you're either going to release those documents in a paper or electronic format. So if they're in an electronic format, they're going to be somewhere on your network server or in your ERP system, document control system, whatever it is that you utilize. The next thing you want to think about is the language. Are you going to have all documents released in English, or are you going to have bilingual documents such as English or Spanish or another language, Mandarin, Vietnamese, depending on the makeup of your employees? Okay. Now the next one is software. Are you going to release documents in PowerPoint, Word, or Excel? Whatever the choice is, you want to control that. Okay. And the next thing is the content. So in this procedure you see here, control of document information, section 5.12, the document author has stated how each section of a procedure is going to be formatted. So in this case he states that the document is going to start out with the purpose of the document, followed by the scope, followed by any applicable definitions, then the reference documents. If there are cross-reference procedures, work instructions, or forms, they need to be referenced in that section 4.0. He stated that a policy section is optional, followed by section 6, the forms. So any forms that are used by that particular procedure that you're creating, you need to list the forms that are applicable to that procedure. And then the last section is section 7, the procedure. So then you just jump right into the procedure, the details of the document. Okay, so getting into 7.5.3.1, documented information required by the quality management system and by this international standard shall be controlled to ensure A, it is available and suitable for use where and when it is needed. B, it is adequately protected, example from loss of confidentiality, improper use, or loss of integrity. So let's start with A. It is available and suitable for use where and when it is needed. So the documents need to be at the point of use, wherever they're going to be used at within your quality management system, whether they're at someone's workstation, a workbench, or at an engineer or inspector's office cubicle area. They need to be available at the point of use for the document to be effective, and also for you to assure that the person performing that task has the document available. Okay. B, it is adequately protected from loss of confidentiality, improper use, or loss of integrity. So you don't want people out in production or anywhere in the quality management system to be making unauthorized changes or to purposely or accidentally delete documents from the system. And then you also want to control the distribution, because certain documents only need to be accessed by those people that are owners of that document or have a process to perform that's stated within that document. So you want to control the distribution. You also want to make sure that those documents don't get outside of the company. So you want to control and protect your IP, your intellectual property. So distribution is very important for that reason as well. Okay, so going further into 7.5.3.2, for the control of documented information, the organization shall address the following activities as applicable. A, distribution, access, retrieval, and use. B, storage and preservation, including preservation of legibility. C, control of changes, version control, revision control. D, retention and disposition. And further, in AS9100, E, prevention of the unintended use of obsolete documented information by removal or by application of suitable identification or controls if kept for any purpose. Okay, documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the quality management system shall be identified as appropriate and be controlled. Documented information retained as evidence of conformity shall be protected from unintended alterations. When documented information is managed electronically, data protection processes shall be defined, such as protection from loss, unauthorized changes, unintended alteration, corruption, or physical damage. Note, access can imply a decision regarding the permission to view the documented information only, or the permission and authority to view and change the documented information. Okay, so what I want to do is go back into the previous section we just talked about, 7.5.3.2 of the standard, specifically 7.532C, control of changes. So what I have here in front of you is a document master list. And this document master list is used as a reference to show the status of documents that are released into the quality management system. It starts with the document type. In this case, it's a document or it's a form, the document number and description, the revision status, the date the document was released, the status, whether it's draft pending approval or if it's approved and released into the system, and the document origin, whether it's an external document or an internal document. And then last but not least, who approved that specific document. And I have the names obviously blacked out for obvious reasons. So this is a very good tool to use. You may have this capability within your ERP system. You might have a document control master function within your document control system, or you may have to do this as an Excel-based offline document. Whatever method you use, it just needs to be effective and it needs to be standardized. Okay. Okay, so let's discuss 7.5.3.2 a little bit more in detail. Specifically, documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the quality management system shall be identified as appropriate and be controlled. So within your quality management system, you have documents that are considered external documents. And those are typically your customer drawings, industry standards, customer specifications, test specifications, workmanship standards, things of that nature that are external to your organization, meaning that they are not a document that you create. They're a document created external outside of your organization. Okay, so those documents also need to be controlled. So drawings are not going to be that difficult because typically you're going to get the latest version of the drawing from your customers if that document does change for whatever reason it is. If they roll the rev and move from a rev A to a B or rev B to a C, you're typically going to have a pretty good system in place to get those updated drawings from your customer. What happens a lot is when you have your customer specifications and customer standards or workmanship standards that are revised, oftentimes what happens is you will have a gap in the system and you won't get the latest copy of that updated document from your customer. So you need to have a process in place where you have a person who is the liaison between you and your customer to assure that you have the latest specifications and standards from that customer whenever a change is made. Okay. Again, so when we talk about document control, it's not limited just to internal documents. It also includes documents of external origin. Okay. Documented information retained as evidence of conformity shall be protected from unintended alterations. So this is what we're talking about here is inspection documents, calibration documents, test records, certificates of conformance. These are documents that we use as evidence of conformity of the product. Okay, they need to be protected. So oftentimes those documents are going to be hard copy, such as like a CMM report. However you store that document and maintain it, you want to make sure it is protected from unintended alterations and that it remains legible at all times. So in case you need to go back and review that document for some reason as a result, God forbid, as a result of a product recall or something, the document needs to be maintained to a point where it can be accessed and can be read again in case you get into a situation like that. Okay. When documented information is managed electronically, data protection processes shall be defined. Example, protection from loss, unauthorized changes, unintended alteration, corruption, and physical damage. Again, that just basically kind of goes into the same thing we just talked about as far as protecting that data that you maintained as evidence of product conformity. It needs to be maintained and it needs to be stored in a manner where the document can easily be retrieved and can be read if it ever needs to be read at some point in the future. Okay. Now the last note here, it says access can imply a decision regarding the permission to view the documented information only, or the permission and authority to view and change the documented information. So when you store your documents on in your quality management system, on your network or in your ERP system, whatever the system is that you're going to use, you want to grant people read-only access, or you want to control the user access. And the reason you're doing that is to control obviously who reads it, because certain people don't have the authority to read certain documents, and also certain people don't have the authority to change specific documents. So you want to post read-only access to those people that only need to read the documents, and also you want to control the user access for those people that need to make changes to documents. If that makes sense to you. Okay. Okay, so as we discussed in the previous slide, we talked about record retention and document retention requirements. I want to go back over that just briefly again because I want to make sure everyone is very clear on this requirement. So here to the left, you see a document records table. It basically states the record, the storage requirement, the retention in terms of years, and its disposition method once that retention period has passed. Okay, so as you can see here, if you look at like the third one down, it says customer surveys. The storage is electronic. The retention period is 3 years, and after that 3-year retention period is passed, the records are deleted from the system. Okay, and if we look further down, we see halfway down the page, we see environmental records. The storage is paper format. The retention period is 3 years, and then after that 3-year period is passed, the document is shredded. Okay, so this is an example of a records retention matrix and table, as you will. So the one thing I want you to keep in mind is that these record retention periods also need to consider any statutory, regulatory, or customer specified record retention periods. So you're going to have records that you generate for your customers, and your customers may have specific record retention periods that are greater than the ones that you state. So you need to keep that into your mind at all times, that's going to have to be considered. Okay, and also any statutory or regulatory requirements that go beyond that, because oftentimes, when you're dealing with medical and aerospace customers, you're going to have record retention periods that are very lengthy, anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 years. So you need to make sure that that's taken into consideration as well. Okay, now on the far right column, I have here what's called a checklist of mandatory documentation required by ISO 9001:2015. So you probably want to pause your video for a while or do a screenshot of this. This is very important. So as you can see, you've got mandatory documents and you also have mandatory records. Okay, and I have the clause here stated why that document is required, where it's required at, where it's required at in the standard. Okay, so the mandatory record, the clause that requires that record, the mandatory documents, and the clause of the standard that requires that document to be maintained. Okay, so again, pause this or take a screenshot of this page and just save it for yourself so you can keep this into account when you're determining your record requirements and your record retention requirements as well. Okay, thank you.